Welcome into Instant Reaction. I am Casey Vallier, joined by the wonderful Larra Overton. Larra, how you doing?
Hey, it is one of the most anticipated days on the NFL calendar because it's literally the NFL calendar. So I am great because now I get to see how this entire fall into the winter shakes out.
Right, and that's why we're here. We are here, part of Instant Reaction, with the 2025 schedule release, which is actually right here behind us. And we're
no big reveal. I feel like there should be like a drum roll and like a curtain.
Like a curtain that
drops.
Yes,
exactly.
Well, before
the moment you've all been waiting for.
And we're gonna dive into all kinds of things in this show, and we're not gonna really dive into every single matchup because you got the schedules in front of you.
And there's so much that can still happen between, there September 7th when the season gets underway for the Indianapolis Colts.
I mean, you know how this league works. There is something new that happens on a weekly basis. So all of this is fluid. Things happen, but we at least know when we're going to play said opponent.
Yep.
For the most part, some things can be flexed, all of that. We see all that happens. But as it sits right now, we will kind of give you a brief overview of everything that we kind of highlight when we're looking at the schedule. But, as far as all of that goes, there's a handful of nuggets that our trusty colleague, Matt Taylor, helped uncover with all the research that Matt does that I want to give him a little bit of credit before we dive into a lot of this. So you're looking at this schedule. It features opponents who had a combined winning percentage of 0.464, which is 24th in the league. So if you do that over, where the Colts rank, that's 24th, as far as schedules go. So it seems like it could be very favorable in the Colts' favor. And you dive a little bit.
You also have to take advantage of favorability.
100%. And that's where all of this really ties in, because that favorability, if that's a word, comes in on the home slate because you have 9 home games, one of those in Berlin, but 2 of those 9 feature playoff games. The other 7 are not.
Playoff teams, yeah.
Yes, playoffs. So that is something that is a benefit when you look at the schedule. But in reverse, on the road, 5 of the 8 road teams you play made the playoffs last year, and 6 of those 8 won at least 10 games. So that's, something to look at when you look at the road and the home slate for the Colts. And then one final nugget before we dive into all of this is the air mileage. Larra, get your bags
this
ready.
Is so good.
Because you are going to be flying an awful lot this year. The Colts are going to travel for a grand total, if you include L.A., you got 2 trips there, Seattle, Germany, everything else, 21,626 air miles. And if you travel around the world, it takes 24,901 miles. So the Colts will fly 86% of the way this season. So get ready for some long trips.
Just take me across the hemisphere.
Exactly. I mean, I saw those numbers and I was like, wait a minute, what? I mean, 21,000 miles in the air, that is one of those where the last couple years it hasn't been that extensive of travel. But you knew with a couple L.A. trips, a Seattle trip, and then you throw in Berlin, it's pretty hefty.
And here's what I want to point out about each of those trips, though. So you go to L.A. to play the Rams September 28th. You'll go back to L.A. to play the Chargers October 19th. You'll go to Berlin November 9th, which will be a big trip, but you have some experience having done the Frankfurt trip just 2 years ago, so not all that unfamiliar. And then your Seattle game is right in the middle of December 14th. So what I like, those trips are pretty well spread out for the Colts. You don't have any of those back-to-back type of trips that you're having to make, and you're at home let's look here. You're on the road, but that's a quick trip at Tennessee before you go to play the Rams for that first LA trip. You're at home for 2 games before you play the Chargers.
Correct.
So that sets you up really well there. You are going to be at Pittsburgh before you go to Berlin. Quick, easy type of trip there. And then you do have an interesting situation when you look. This is where things get a little bit hairy for me. Looking at that December slate, because you'll play Jacksonville, and we know that has been such a bugaboo for Indianapolis playing in that stadium on the road against the Jags. Then you go out to Seattle, which at least at that point, you'll really know the Seahawks identity. That's a team that's going to look so different this year than what they did last.
Yes. No, I'm really glad that you said that, because we're going to dive into kind of the areas that are, the strengths or the weaknesses, if you will, of the schedule. But you mentioned there in the back half, part of the positive of that being probably the toughest stretch, I'm not going to foreshadow anything, but I'm going to talk about that later on. But that's a tough stretch.
After the bye.
It is very tough, but you're going to know the identity of your team and more than likely what those other teams are going to look like. So that is one benefit, is that toughest stretch, arguably, of the season comes a little bit later when you're kind of rolling in all of that.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to dive into kind of week by week, if you will, right now, and I want to start with one of the big elephants in the room. It's the season opener, because that is an area that the Colts have struggled. We have 13 of the last 15 openers they have lost.
Yep.
You have not won at home since 2013 when you beat the then Oakland Raiders.
Yeah.
Can you name the quarterback of the Raiders?
Only because I'm going to cheat, because we had this conversation before.
All right.
Terrell Pryor was the quarterback of the Raiders. The Raiders aren't even in the same city that they were. That's how long it's been. They have relocated. They have vacated Oakland. They're now in Las Vegas. They've got a new coach. They've got a new quarterback.
Yes.
Like, a lot of things look different for them.
A lot of things look different.
Since the Colts beat them back in 2013.
It is wild to say. It's still weird to say Las Vegas Raiders, because I still want to say Oakland. But, yes, the Las Vegas Raiders were the team that have now relocated, the last team the Colts beat in a season opener. They've lost 11 straight season openers. They kick it off this year with Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle. So, hey, the Lou Anarumo defense is going to be tested right off the bat.
I love it, because I think back to what the atmosphere was like last year for the opener against the Houston Texans. Of course, that was a divisional game, all of that. So maybe a little bit different when you factor in there isn't quite the hostility maybe with the Miami Dolphins that you have with a divisional opponent. But I know Lucas Oil will be rocking, because you have 2 home games to start the season. Huge opportunities when you talk about that Miami Dolphins home opener. And then week 2, you get Denver in here, which was a playoff team last year, of course. It's going to be really interesting to see what they look like coming into this season. I like getting Denver early. I will say getting both of those teams early, I think, favors well for the Indianapolis Colts, especially with this defense, because Lou, that group, they're going to want to come out and open the season with a statement.
And I don't want to, put the carriage before the horse here, but you talk about early in the season, typically we see the offensive struggles earlier in the year.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked about that over the last handful of years, that some of these high-powered offenses, it takes them a couple weeks. So especially a team like the Dolphins, who are going to put up numbers because of, let's face it, when you look at Tyreek and Jalen Waddle, they're 2 of the best receivers in the game. They're going to put up 1,000-yard seasons. So getting them earlier, I do agree with that. It's going to be anxious to see, how that Lou Anarumo defense starts right off the bat with a really high-powered offense. Now, the next point I want to bring up, primetime games. Every time you look at the schedule, that's one of the things you always want to target. The Colts have one primetime game as it sits right now, and it's at home, which is awesome. I cannot wait for that. They are hosting
a Monday night game,
hosting the San Francisco 49ers. Now, if you look at the primetime game, historically, the Colts over the last handful of years have been on the short end of a lot of those. Over the last 10 years, the Colts have played the 20th most primetime games. They've lost 5 straight primetime games. 10 of their last 15, though, have been on the road.
Yeah.
So getting one at home is very exciting. Only the Jags have had fewer home primetime games over the last decade than the Colts. So I am very excited for the Colts getting a home Monday night football game against Brock Purdy and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, that is late in the year.
It's like Christmas week, though. It's really cool.
December 22nd.
That is going to be – I love that week, because you have – and the other thing is – you have a short week because you get the Monday night game. So I like the fact that you're at home for both of those. So you got a Monday night home game, and then you're going to follow that on Sunday with Jacksonville.
Yeah.
So that's great, for you to have that opportunity within that stretch of a week, because you do have all that momentum coming off of a Monday night, what you hope is a win. And I know it's not a primetime game, but I love the fact that week 2, that game against Denver at home, is a 4:05.
Yes.
So it's like primetime light. Because it's a late
time light. I like that. Yeah.
It's not a 1 o'clock. So I love that, because that window, I think, has a little bit more intrigue to it than the 1 o'clock start.
Absolutely. And you talk about that window. They've got a couple of those West Coast trips.
Right.
So there are a little bit more of the 4 o'clock flavor to the Colts schedule this year. When you look at the Rams and the Chargers, those are going to be 4:25 games as well. So I agree with you there. Primetime light. I really like that. I'm gonna coin that. I'm going to use that moving forward. And another game, I'm going to label it as a primetime game just because it's the only one on, because 9:30 in the morning, you're going to play against the Atlanta Falcons in Berlin. Now, that was announced Tuesday morning, so we've had, a little bit more than 24 hours to kind of, dive into that one. But I'm really excited for the Colts to have 2 games in Germany. They played in Frankfurt a couple years ago. Now they're going to Berlin. And we have seen the growth of the NFL, especially internationally. I know you are very much a part of all of that. We know a handful of people from Germany. We've got the Bjorn Werner, everything. Yeah. It's been pretty fun to see the Colts and that Germany kind of take over.
And I got such a taste of it when we went to Frankfurt 2 years ago. So I'm excited because I feel like that has only grown exponentially even since we were there 2 seasons ago. And Berlin is that's such an iconic sports city. The venue is with hosting the Olympic Games and everything that goes into that. So I can't wait. I hope they bring back Country Roads because when they played that in Frankfurt, I mean, it was electric.
It was awesome.
The other thing that's fun about this game in Germany, I don't know if you would realize it unless you were there, but anything goes in terms of jerseys at that. Like all of the fans over there. Like I saw an Al Bundy jersey when we were in Frankfurt, like the Polk High School, like the Married with Children, like it's great. Now what I want to see is the growth of, I want to see more Jonathan Taylor jerseys and DeForest Buckner jerseys and Kenny Moore jerseys and Pittman and Richardson. I hope that some of that takes over when we get to Berlin, which is in fact, you mentioned it earlier, this is a home game for the Indianapolis Colts in Berlin, and that is significant.
Well, you talk about that being a home game, which, knock on wood, I'm really excited because now I get to go. I don't travel to road games, so I'm very excited that as it sits right now, my passport's ready to go. I am hopefully making that trip to Berlin. I can't wait, but you talk about the connection that the Colts have with the marketing partnership already with Germany. I'm anticipating a little bit more of a Colts flavor than what you saw in Frankfurt, just because of the established relationship that they've already made over the last couple of years.
Could not agree more. It's a very passionate fan base. They love American football, and they are incredibly knowledgeable about the Colts. When we had our a party, kind of kickoff party over there in Frankfurt, it was awesome to just talk to so many, fans, just their excitement, the players that they wanted to know more about, all of that. So there will be a ton ramping up to that game, which falls on November 9th. Then the Colts will have that Week 11 bye to follow.
Which is great.
That's a good time.
That's what I was thinking. You think about the last...
We've had really late byes the last years.
Late. I mean, last year, Week 14, the latest possible bye. And if you think about it, you go from training camp all the way through essentially the entire season, and then you get that bye week, and then it's you got your final 3 or 4 games to go. Yeah. So I think the bye falling in November is nice.
It's interesting. One thing to point out too is the Colts will basically have a month away from Lucas Oil Stadium because you'll host the Tennessee Titans on October 26th. Then you go to Pittsburgh. Then you go to Berlin to host the Falcons in Germany. Then you have a bye. You come off the bye with Kansas City. You aren't back home until November 30th.
Wow, yeah.
So that's interesting. The other thing, Casey, I love about the schedule, love catching Kansas City off the bye.
Yep, agreed.
And you were talking earlier as we were kind of talking about the structure of the show, which games we're most excited for. I love that November 23rd Kansas City game. I'm curious, does that game get flexed? It's a 1 o'clock right now. Does that maybe get flexed into a later window? And I think that for me, having been at that game in 2019 when the Colts beat the Chiefs on Sunday Night Football, that was my first experience at Arrowhead Stadium.
Yeah.
That's one that I'm pointed to on this slate that I absolutely cannot wait for. Because at that point, man, the Colts should be humming in terms of like where you are. You've solidified, who you are as a team. Everything really should be clicking on all 3 phases. I love that November 23rd game.
And then, you go a little bit past that bye, and one of the big elephants in the room is that, I don't want to say dreaded game, but that trip down to Jacksonville.
And you played Jacksonville twice in 4 weeks.
I will say this. I feel like, and you can come at me all you want. This is Casey Vallier, and I'm saying it, the schedule on the division games has been so strange lately. Once again, you
It was
finish with
heavily
an opponent
front-loaded last
year. This year, you finish with the Tennessee Titans before Halloween again, but then you don't play another one until the final 7 games of the season. So you'll play 2 games against Houston, 2 games against Jacksonville in 4 of the last 6 games you have. What is your thoughts on waiting so long to take on, I would say, if you're looking at, the strength of the division, it would be Houston and Jacksonville along with the Colts. I think Jacksonville and the Colts are probably right there, especially over Tennessee.
What I think that the schedule makers were probably looking to is we want to have these situations where, hey, this is playing for division gamesmanship, opportunities to make that back half of the schedule, putting a ton of weight in terms of AFC South battle, so that you're hoping that, hey, this team takes, it's between these 2 teams to take the lead in the division. And then it's, and the back half, hey, if the Colts beat Jacksonville in week 28 at home, they clinched the division. I think that something you're looking for is just the magnitude of those games and how heavy the implications could be, so that you have a ton of intrigue surrounding this division later on in the season, which you didn't have last year because Houston wrapped it up so early. So when you look at those 4 teams, certainly Jacksonville and Tennessee are going to be much different, of course, when you look at the direction that they've gone this offseason. Houston, you kind of expect to, be what they have been the last 2 years. And then, of course, the Colts, revamped defense, what they're going to do offensively now with the addition of Tyler Warren. Yeah, really excited to see what it's just going to make those games really meaningful, November and December.
Very much so. And you talk about those final 4, the last 6 games, 4 of those being division games, and the other 2 that are sandwiched in there are NFC games. So it's one of those things when you're getting close to that spot, a lot of times that conference record becomes so pivotal down the stretch, and you've got a real good chance with 4 of your last 6 being against teams not only in the AFC, but in the AFC South. And if everything turns out the way that we're hoping it does, that final game in Houston could be for all the marbles. So we talk about, currently having one primetime game with that game against the Niners. There's a real good chance that Week 18 game in Houston, it could really mean a lot because, as you mentioned, and I'm right there with you, I think Houston is probably going to be what everybody expects them to be kind of, the team that is maybe one of the front runners.
They are who we thought they were.
They are who we thought they were. Exactly. And that is one thing that the division, it's always hard to figure out where they're going to be. But once again, a little surprising that you're done with the Titans before Halloween. But when you throw in the back half, you do have a pretty good stretch there of the AFC South. It's going to make it challenging, but I do like it at the end. And that kind of brings me to the next point, because I think we're both going to be on the same page here with this. But you look at this schedule, where do you think the most difficult portion comes for you when you look at this 25 schedule?
To me, it's after the bye. Yeah. It is that stretch of late November through December when it's at Kansas City, you're playing in Arrowhead, you catch Houston at home. Then you have back-to-back road trips where you go to Jacksonville, you go to Seattle. I mentioned that just a little bit earlier. But you come home week of Christmas, you get the San Francisco 49ers for that Monday. There's going to be a ton of juice to have a Monday night game at home. You'll follow that up with another opportunity to see Jacksonville, and then you wrap things up against the Houston Texans. Just looking at the magnitude of it all, that is significant because Kansas City, AFC opponent within that stretch of all of these divisional games that you have, and then those 2 NFC games with the Niners and the Seahawks.
Yeah, I completely agree. That stretch there, it is challenging. But as I mentioned earlier, that is one of the areas where you get towards the end of the season, your identity is a little bit, you have a little bit better idea of what your identity is. And what's the mantra they always talk about? You want to be playing your best football when November and December roll around. So that's when you're going to have your toughest stretch. And that brings me to my next point. When you look at the schedule in reverse from difficulty, where do you think there's an area where they can really gain some positive momentum?
Ooh, great question. I mean, I look at, you have to off the top. You've got to capitalize on 2 home games. I mean, they're just
completely agree.
There's no excuse to not take advantage of weeks 1 and 2 at home.
And their AFC opponents, too.
And their
which
AFC
really helps
opponents.
Down the stretch.
I like this stretch in here of October.
Yep.
Where you get Raiders and Cardinals at home. Chargers on the road will be tough, but then you catch Tennessee at home. I like that little stretch. 3 out of 4 games you play at home. You get the Chargers on the road. Obviously, Chargers are a very intriguing team, but I do like maybe what that matchup can be between, the 2 coaches who you have, like that bit of chess match. Both incredibly cerebral, offensive-minded head coaches. I like that one falling in the middle. So I look at that stretch of October. Well, it's kind of twofold. Weeks 1 and 2 at home, and then that stretch of October. Capitalize.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I had week 5 through that trip to Berlin. You do have, you mentioned it, a couple of those road tests with the Chargers and the Steelers, but I think there's a couple.
Yeah, what are the Steelers going to be, right?
They're still, nobody knows. I mean, we don't, right now, it's Mason Rudolph at quarterback.
Yeah.
And so there's all kinds of question marks, which ultimately around this time last year, it was, is it going to be Russell? Is it going to be Justin Fields? So they're kind of in a similar quarterback, mold. They just got rid of George
Quandary, if you
Pickens.
will. Quarterback quandary.
Yeah, quarterback quandary. Nice
yes,
word.
Thanks.
You writing now? Are you? But there are a handful of question marks with what's going on in Pittsburgh, and that might lend its hand to being a little bit more favorable for the Colts, and that is a stretch where they can definitely take advantage of. Now, before we wrap up, you talked about this a little bit earlier, but what is the game or opponent that you're most excited about? And like I mentioned, it could be matchup, it could be player, or even just where you're going.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I talked about, the Kansas City game. I love it. I love where it falls, coming off the bye. Love going to Arrowhead, having the opportunity to play there. Obviously, Kansas City is that team that everyone is targeting within the conference and all of that. So I love that one. Also, how much longer do we have of the Mahomes-Kelsey tandem, right?
Absolutely.
It's a lot of that intrigue surrounding the Kansas City Chiefs. Then, selfishly, I haven't been to SoFi Stadium yet. So we get 2 LA trips, 2 opportunities to go there, and I haven't experienced Seattle yet. And so many people around this building who have been here for a while talk about just how cool that
the 12th man
atmosphere is. So I am excited to go there and experience Seattle. I'll gotta probably go over and find that OG Starbucks.
Right, exactly, yeah.
And do all that. How about you?
So for me, it is the game when the Las Vegas Raiders come to town, and it is just strictly because of the Brock Bowers, Tyler Warren conversation we're going to have. Because way I look at this, and like I said, I don't want to try and pump him up too much, but because we've only seen him practice for a week and change.
Yeah.
But there's a real chance that Tyler Warren and Brock Bowers are kind of part of this new tight end group that you talk about. Travis Kelce, another guy we're going to see, George Kittle. They're getting a little older. So, maybe these are a couple of the guys that as we talk about tight ends moving forward, it's kind of that next crop. So getting to see Brock Bowers at Lucas Oil with Tyler Warren on the other sideline, and that'll be kind of a fun matchup, especially because we all know what that conversation is going to be like leading up to that game.
Yeah.
So maybe that's what I'm really excited about, is that lead up, because it's going to be very tight end heavy about 2 guys that are just dynamic with the ball in their hands. So that's the game I'm really looking forward to.
I mean, talk about chess match too, with a Pete Carroll, right?
Oh, I know. Yeah.
I
keep forgetting that Pete Carroll is coaching the Raiders. That is something that I keep forgetting, but you're right. Yes.
Yeah. You think about Pete Carroll versus, Lou Shane type of situation. That's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So that is kind of all we had on schedule for the Colts schedule.
Oh, can we do one low-key thing that's interesting?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Preseason, you only have 1 home preseason game, too. That's kind of interesting. And I mean, no, we probably doesn't carry nearly the weight, but yeah, you'll get Green Bay at home for the preseason. You start the preseason at Baltimore. And hey, shocking, Casey, you're going to face the Cincinnati Bengals in the preseason.
Right. Which, this throws me back to a couple years ago when they didn't have the Bengals on the schedule. It was like, why not? This is just, it's like peanut butter and jelly. Just keep it together. It makes and for me, it's one of those, I love going over there because our crew, we always make sure we stop and have lunch. This past year, we had, Mike Chappell in the car with us,
yes.
and that's the best.
What is it, Montgomery Inn, Skyline, Graders? What
Well, I
do
mean,
you hit them all?
Pick them all. La Rosa's, you do it all. You hit that track, and it's whatever sounds good at the time. But yes, that is true. So that is one thing that you lose one home game with the Berlin, and then also as far as preseason goes. But you know what? That's part of the way the schedule rolls out. But it's finally here. We've talked about it. We've seen it. And, I think there are a handful of spots where this Colts team can take advantage. But as we mentioned, that last stretch, it's going to be very important that they were able to win some games that maybe on paper you shouldn't. You got to be able to take advantage.
So the next thing we look forward to is that training camp schedule announcement. So that'll come up in just a few weeks too, because that's the next thing now. Now that you have the regular season and preseason schedules, hey, let's get training camp set, and cannot wait to see what that looks like. Usually we have some joint practices to look forward to. Who is that going to be? There's some intrigue, of course.
I would assume it'll be the Packers because they're coming here. So you would think that Grand Park has been kind of the area that a lot of teams have really enjoyed doing the joint practice because of the space and the layout and all of that. So I'm not trying to.
Will Green Bay bring their bikes? Will they ride the bikes? Can we have that tradition here? I mean, is that exclusively Lambeau thing?
We've got the bikes with the defensive line have their bikes. Let's just have them just riding out together. Hey, I'm for it. I mean, and like you said, when that comes out, that'll be something that we'll always check off as another tent pole thing that comes, but that is coming soon, and that's the biggest thing. The schedule is out, so don't blink because we're going to be up at Grand Park real soon because we got players in the building now. Now we have the opponents and everything scheduled, so it's a very exciting time. And Larra, once again, thank you so much for joining me.
Appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate our Matt Taylor, too, for all his little tidbits that he brought into this conversation.
I like to say that we do a lot of things on our own, but Matt, you give big tip
credit
to the
where
cat
credit's due.
because you literally turn over every rock. You help us find all the research. So really, really appreciate that. And that'll do it for Instant Reaction regarding the Colts 2025 schedule release.